We hope you're well, family. Thank you so much for joining us. Africa has so much untold stories to tell, most of which remain untold. We'll try our best to share with you some of the mysteries that happen in our continent. If you do enjoy unsolved, solved, cold cases, bizarre, and sometimes mysterious, you're in the right place. Kindly subscribe, share, hit the like button. Hope you enjoy. Our story takes place in the southern part of Africa, South Africa, a very beautiful and very scenic place. Completely awesome out there because I reside in South Africa. KwaZulu Natal, Durban, is where center stage takes place. Very well known as a tourist resort with very sandy beaches, awesome and lush, completely sunny all the time. Little Miami, some people like to call it. This is where the heart-drenching and heart-dropping case of Sandile Sibiya takes place. It was Friday the 24th of May 2019 when one of the staff members at the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial Hospital walks into one of their storerooms to be met by a scene that was completely horrific. This was something that was not going to be easily erased from his memory. Blood on the wall and a strange dripping fluid from the ceiling. Completely strange. Of course, these were the telltale signs that something horrific had happened in that place. The reason for him being there was the fact that days prior to this, the hospital had been plagued by a horrific stench that had strengthened over days. This stench was so terrible that staff continuously complained about how horrible it was. This was what prompted them to begin a search. And upon searching for days, it was found that the stench was coming from the storeroom. They investigated the drip and the blood on the wall and found that there was a body in the ceiling. The body in the ceiling was partially disfigured and had already begun the decomposition process, so they couldn't quite identify as to who this person was. They did say though that the person was in his late 30s because he was well built, and they noticed that he was a male also. He had been there for a few days because of the decomposition process that had begun. It was also noted though that it was going to be very hard for this person to have climbed up there by themselves because there was no ladder, no chair or table that was anywhere close by. And also the person could have not crawled through the ceiling simply because the ceiling was too thin to crawl through. This sparked questions as to how this person could have got into the ceiling. Some nurses speculated though and said that he could have been one of the mentally ill patients that had been trying to escape through the ceiling. The following day though, this was denied, notified and came through to identify the body. The body was identified as a late Mr. Andile Sibiya, who was a construction worker aged 53. He had come to the hospital because he had injured himself at work. He had broken his femur bone and was in excruciating pain. Upon arrival, he had to wait for 4 whole days before getting help, simply because the hospital did not have an orthopedic doctor, so he was to be transferred to a nearby hospital called Addington Hospital. When his family came to see him on the second day, he still had not been helped and was in excruciating pain. Excruciating pain, they described it. Gratefully though, he did see the orthopedic doctor. Funny thing though is that 6 days after his family visit is when he was declared as missing. Security guards tried searching for him. Police came through and tried searching for him also because he was reported at the police station as a missing person. He was nowhere to be found, and they tried and tried and tried but could not find Mr. Sandile Sibiya. Was nowhere to be found. His family, though, was promised an autopsy and they did receive. It wasn't publicly disclosed as to what was his cause of death. They do know, and I hope that they are satisfied with what they received. However, there are some strange things, though, that do beg the question as to what happened to the late Mr. Sandile Sibiya. One of which being, how did he get into the ceiling with a broken leg when there was no chair, no ladder, or table? I find that to be very strange. Do you smell foul play like I do? Pun intended. I should mention, though, that no arrests were made. Nobody was charged with anything. The MEC, though, Noma Gugu, promised that upon investigation, if anybody was found to have been guilty of anything, they would fully be accountable for the loss of life that had occurred. Nobody was brought to book, though. Absolutely nobody was brought to book. And up until today, it's still unknown as to how the late Mr. Sandile Sibiya ended up in the ceiling. We pray and hope that his family have found peace with the autopsy they received. I hope that justice is served if there's a need for justice to be served. The hospital really needs to pull up their game, though, because such cases cannot be allowed to happen. Though it being an isolated incident, such an incident should have never happened. A few questions, though, need to be asked. Like, why does the hospital not have cameras? Or how do patients suddenly go missing? And when they do go missing, who should be held accountable for the fact that they actually are missing? And how can nobody be possibly charged for the fact that the patient ended up in a ceiling dead? I don't know, this doesn't just sit well with me and smells a little funny if you ask me. Again, no pun intended. Honestly, none whatsoever. No pun intended. The funny thing is the fact that nurses would automatically assume that it was a mental patient that had gone missing. Why would you assume such a thing? Is it that a lot of mental patients go missing at the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial Hospital? Do you guys keep on losing mentally ill patients, and that's why you'd assume that the late Mr. Sandile Sibiya would be one of them? Do they normally turn up dead? I think this hospital needs to be investigated, and I think that something needs to be done about this. I think the MEC is not doing a great job, and this should be questioned. I don't know, man. I think that a lot needs to happen in terms of our medical health care in Africa, more specifically South Africa, as the leaders of the economy in Africa. I don't know. I think that we need to do quite a bit for our people, much more, because Mr. Sandile Sibiya was a hard-working man who was a breadwinner for his family. Mr. Sandile Sibiya only came in because he had broken his leg. I don't think that that would warrant death in a ceiling. Well, this is another African story. Hope the silence has been broken.